As many Buddhist masters have said, we experience things very intensely because we take everything that we experience to be so real. We take everything so seriously. And because we take everything so seriously, then our experiences are intense, and so therefore we become agitated, we become disturbed, and then our emotions and feelings begin to become exaggerated and they flare up. This happens because, as Buddhism says, we have this some kind of instinctive, self-protective response, which is sort of ingrained. Everything that we experience, we're thinking in terms of how to protect oneself, how to keep things that are threatening to our own well-being, to our sense of selfhood, to the integrity of our selfhood at bay. But what Buddhism is saying is that we don't have to keep things at bay, because the source of our troubles, if you like, is inside. It lies in how we actually view ourselves. In other words, who we think is being harmed by. Whenever we have some kind of disturbing experience, who we think is harmed by that. When we take everything that we experience very seriously, then because the experience is very intense, one instinctively thinks that this bad experience, this unpleasant experience has been harmful to me. To me, for example. But what Buddhism says is that is not true. It is not true because, for one thing, we've mistaken on many different levels. Firstly, the source of harm, if such a harm has been caused, is not really, it's not external. Secondly, the harm that we think has been created in itself, its reality is contingent on the belief of the individual. So the more you believe in the harm that has been caused, the greater the intensity of the experience will be. Less you believe it, less harm would be caused. That's one thing. And the other thing is the ego, or the self, that we think is being damaged or harmed in some way, in itself is not something that actually can be harmed in the true sense of the word, as we normally would understand it. The degree of reality is not something that is objectively established, but it's contingent on the subjective states of the individual concerned. And that's why Dharma can be helpful, Dharma can be useful precisely because of that. That's what Buddhism says. That's why we could actually use the Dharma in order to deal with life's difficulties. If that were not so, then it would be very difficult. That's the Buddhist view. Because then any kind of damage done to one's own sense of selfhood would be lethal, because it would go right through to one's own being. But Buddhism says that is not true. And also, if the life experiences are not contingent on the subjective states of the individual concerned, then again it would be real. Whatever you experience would be real. So whatever is real would be harder to overcome. Real in the sense that completely real. Something that is really real would be hard to overcome. But something that is real, to put it in Buddhist terms, on the relative level, as we say, then that can be overcome. So, yes, suffering exists, but suffering exists only on the relative level. And because of that, if we pick up different forms of Buddhist practices, then we would be able to reduce our level of suffering precisely because of the reasons I mentioned. So we need to pursue Buddha Dharma, but we don't have to think of Buddha Dharma, as I mentioned before, purely in terms of studying the teachings or doing meditation or something of that kind. But Buddhism says that we have to address all aspects of our being. And Buddhism talks about addressing three aspects of our being: body, and vocal or speech, and mind. So what Buddhism is saying then is, if we learn to sort of think in that way, then we will be much better off. That's the whole thing. So when we are down, we don't get so plunged into darkness that we sort of get completely consumed by despair. Or when things are going right, we don't think oh, this is so great, and sort of take it for granted, and sort of ride on that high. But one has a more realistic kind of perspective on life, and one has to build on that. So I think this is very important to understand, and if we understand it that way, then we can understand. We can put Buddhist notion of renunciation, detachment, things like that in proper perspective. Because renunciation and all of that, it doesn't mean you renounce everything. What it means is you choose to renounce certain things so that you can pursue other things more passionately. So if you renounce like a normal sort of what is the word, married life or something like that, then you may have more time on your hand to pursue other things which you are more interested in, and so you can do that. It doesn't mean that you have renounced you have renounced everything. It's about prioritizing. What you renounce for what reason. This is the thing. It's not renunciation, sort of meaning like you have given up on life. It's not like that. It's about making a choice in life, saying, I choose this rather than that. I choose this lifestyle rather than that lifestyle. And then, pursuing that in order to find oneself, in order to find fulfillment in one's own life. And that's the key factor there. So if we think of it like that, then we can sort of see as I said, Buddhist idea of renunciation and detachment and things like that. I think in a proper fashion, we see it in a proper context, and not sort of in a nihilistic kind of way, which is often how it is translated as, sort of life denying and sort of very pessimistic. Somehow life itself is a bad thing, that we would have been better off without being born or something. And this is obviously not the Buddhist view. And I just wanted to emphasize that. Talking about integral Buddhism and so on, it's my hope that this will become even more clear, by incorporating different aspects of one's life and seeing all of that, these things as part of one's own Dharma practice. Because Dharma practice has to do, and every time when we are doing something that really does benefit us in a proper way, according to Buddhism, is a Dharma practice. Anything that we do which is detrimental to our well-being, whatever it is it's what's the word? Non-dharma. It is non-dharma, non-dharmic, and so so I think we have to really think like that, and that's why often previous masters have always said that sometimes even when we do what we think is Dharma practice, but because we're doing it with wrong motivation or doing it incorrectly, we actually don't get dharmic benefit. We may actually incur some harm because of the distortion that has been introduced into it. And sometimes we may actually be doing something that may not be so obviously dharmic to our naked eyes, if you like, but is nevertheless dharmic, and so therefore it produces positive results. So I think in that way, whatever we think, whatever we feel, whatever we do, all these things have impact on ourselves as human beings, and so therefore we need to look at all aspects of ourselves. And because of that, as I said, in Buddhism, all these different things, even taking interest in astronomy and things like that, said to be, could be used as part of dharmic practice. And doing medicine, art and craft, as I mentioned, painting, and making music, and so on and so forth, and dramatics. All these things, according to Buddhism, can be used as part of dharmic practice. In Tibetan Buddhist canon, there are a lot of texts on all kinds of subject matter. So even engaging in logic, trying to think clearly, this is also seen as part of the Dharma practice, and actually seen as a very, very important part of Dharma practice, because what we engaged in normally is disorganized way of thinking, and learning to organize our thoughts is very helpful because it clarifies our mind. And so then when we put our mind to something, in terms of contemplation or something like that, then it's much more easy for us to stay with those thoughts, and follow our thoughts, train of thoughts properly, so that we can actually see what's going on, instead of the mind going all over the place as it normally happens. Because according to Buddhism, again, we will discuss a little bit of this when I talk about Buddhist psychology and so on. The thoughts and the emotions and feelings, they go hand in hand. So disorganized thoughts means very confused emotions. We'll have very confused emotions. But if we have more, if we think more clearly, our emotions will also begin to respond, accordingly. That's the Buddhist view, and I will explain how that works, and how that ties up with the Buddhist practice of mindfulness, awareness, and things of that kind. Again, contrary to what many people say, Buddhism does not say, you should practice mindfulness so that you don't get caught up in your thoughts. What Buddhism says is, if you practice mindfulness and awareness, then you can learn to organize your thoughts more properly. We can't just be told, to learn to organize our thoughts. We have to have some technique to do it, and in Buddhism we use mindfulness practice to do that. So first we use mindfulness practice to learn to gather our mind, and then we use our mindfulness practice to learn to deal with all different kinds of mental states and processes. So in any case, using all these different techniques, then they designed, as I said, to reduce the level of suffering that we experience due to our own unruly mind. So according to Buddhism, much of the suffering that we experience are avoidable. So instead of thinking, I want a life without suffering and pain, first we should be thinking about how can I make my life more resilient, more satisfying, and less painful, and where I have less suffering. So that should be our goal, and that is achievable. Life without suffering and pain, that's a very difficult thing. But to think that I can actually do without a lot of the unnecessary suffering and so on, and then that I can achieve, and so then learn up pick up the necessary skills to do that, and that's the main point. And so in the next few days, I'm hoping that we can discuss some of the techniques that we use in Buddhism to do that. If we have a better attitude towards old age, death, sickness, etc., we'll suffer less. Doesn't mean we won't suffer at all, but we'll suffer less. If we have a bad attitude, then we will suffer more. That's the key.